Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you, Tracy and DK.
We weren't burned at the stake. Just kidding. We're all still alive and unsinged.
You're still alive.
We're all still part of the same church. Yay.
Ready for round two. That's what you're saying.
Really great. I don't know if all of you had a chance to read through some of the chats, but I did want to highlight, we did, Jessie left already, but Jessie is actually, she is a Black woman, and so she was giving some, she like helped Tracy kind of give some feedback before the presentation. I've talked to her before as well. She's our good friend. I think it would be good to kind of hear what she has to say about some of the responses. So she was doing, Jessie is really compassionate and really honest and sincere.
Yeah.
And so if you haven't had a chance to read her response, I think it's worth kind of reading.
Yeah, it'll be good for her to communicate what was hurtful, what was helpful. So at least we understand where she's coming from.
Yeah.
That will help us to be more sensitive how we communicate with people who are different race, right? Yeah.
I think I really appreciate a lot of what you guys have said. Is I appreciate all of you like really engaging. Like David shared a lot of stuff. Matt, you know, you had some really good questions as well. I'm sorry if we hadn't get to everyone. So if you feel like there's something you want to discuss now.
Yeah. I have one question. Now, from this survey that both of you put together, the results, what were particular result that really caught your attention and why?
So you notice that we spent some time on like the Antifa communist socialists, and that did count as caught off guard because and maybe I'm naive, but that, hi Bryce, that was not an immediate thought I had was to compare this with those like groups. And I've heard those terms kind of been around, so it was very interesting for me to like look into those. And we brought up because it wasn't like one person, like there were multiple posts, and we were trying to figure out like, was it one person or like, but it seemed across the board. And the other thing that was really, right, there was a lot of like concern that it would be really leftist and left-wing and that we would cancel conservative or Republican thoughts. And of course, like, so, and so that's why we wanted to make sure that we address, like, we don't want, like, and admittedly, Tracy and I may land a little bit more like left of the center in our political like understandings, but not to say that I don't agree. Like I certainly have voted like Republican in my past as well, and so like we just wanted to make sure that if people didn't feel like they were going to be attacked or like, it was going to be like shoving things down people's throats. And then the thing that we talked about too, the heart issue versus the skin issue, like multiple responses, like in different ways. They were like, this is a heart issue, not a skin pigmentation issue. And so I think those were the kind of things that caught our eye. And it turns out that those responses were longer, whereas some of the other ones were kind of like, I'm happy to learn more, like absolutely equity, you know, stuff. And a lot of concern about like the politicizing of these issues. Which understandable, it's election year. So of course, like a lot more politics is gonna come out.
I think there was a lot of, the sentiment that I got from kind of the most extreme responses was that Black Lives Matter, while sounding on paper sounds like it is promoting racial equality, is, as we're seeing in reality, creating divide. I think that was sort of the heart behind some of these comments about like, it's not doing anything, I don't support this organization. I think that Christians need to wake up and not just blindly align themselves to liberal agenda. We got a lot of that kind of language. And I think if it had been 4 months ago, it would have been a little bit triggering for me because I was very much mired in a very liberal sort of circle of influence. But I now understand the pain of observing more division than not as a result of something that was intended to bring unity, right? And I actually now see that as common ground, where as Christians, we like, our goal is unity, our goal is peace, our goal is reconciliation. And so that was a huge blessing to me to be able to then view responses like that in that way. There was, and this is a personal thing for me, something that I did have to kind of move past was there was a lot of Trump support in the in the responses, and like that didn't surprise me, but I think even more so in this election year. I wasn't here in 2016, and I was just explaining to a friend that like I think I'm going crazy.
So how was Trump support expressed in their survey?
It was expressed in that like that Trump is not racist and that Trump is the one that's actually doing good for the community. He's doing more than BLM is doing. It was just in support of like, it was saying that Trump is being slandered by the left and that we need to watch out for that kind of disinformation. And like,
so was your survey that sort of invited people to respond that way, or that came out from nowhere?
That came out kind of from nowhere. To me, it came out from nowhere because our questions were very much like, what do you know about Black Lives Matter? What do you know about? And it became extremely political very fast.
I see.
And so that was something that I needed to kind of just say, okay, that's okay. I will not jump onto that wagon right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
A lot of what you guys were saying was like words really matter. And so this implication that someone is inherently racist or whatever, or whether the intention is there or not, like, I think that's also where it came from. So I wonder if it was coming from like, oh, I believe all these things. I'm not racist. He's not racist. Like, stop calling us racist. And that makes a lot of sense too. Like, I can understand where a lot of the emotions or how it got there very quickly.
But you know, I appreciate the fact that you two sort of make it clear that we're not discussing political issues or political candidate here. I think we need to be clear on that. Mm-hmm. And I'm also encouraged to see the fact that the categories you put together, Christians need to be actively involved in matters of racial injustice. I signed as a quite good. These are good numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a healthy response that I've seen.
Almost 100%.
Yeah. So what tells me that, you know, that what you two are doing, I think we need to be more intentional. How can we express those in action in the future?
Right.
Because we need to mobilize these people that they care that we need to be involved. But the question is, how should we get involved?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's also difficult because like, I think everyone has different ideas of what's the right
you two
way.
process and come up with some suggestions. We'll discuss and screen some of those possibilities. I like these numbers. They're very good.
Yeah, I color coded it so that it would be more clear which side was, because I was reading it and I was like, this is too hard. I have to keep looking back and forth.
And a part of what we have this forum is the process of dialogue, right? To get understanding where we are, what common things we can share together so we can be collaborative, so to speak. I think that's what we want to do. We want to be collaborative. Okay, we have differences. That's okay. We understand, recognize your differences. How can we together as sons and daughters of God to come together for common good? Yeah.
Is it okay if I add? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, David.
Okay. Do you mind if I add a quick thing? First, I just want to say again, like, I know I made a couple comments, but like, thank you so much for like doing this, like genuinely. I think really it's like so important. And I think like, if I could just make one point, I think like, you know, we talk a lot about like, oh yeah, we need to focus on salvation and not focus on these issues. And I think that has often been used to just push these types of issues to the side and not talk about them or think about them. I think that's a problem and a serious problem. But then I also think we can't overcorrect in the other direction too. And like over focus on these issues. I heard a really good metaphor. Is like Jesus, like there's a boat, right? And it's sinking. And the boat is like society. And Jesus came and he saves the people off of the boat. He doesn't save all of society. He didn't come to reform and create a utopia on earth, right? He came to save us, and in his final judgment, he's gonna come and he's gonna establish his reign on earth. And so I think in a way, like definitely we need to like understand, definitely we need to take action as Christians, yes. And amen 1,000 times to so many of those things. But then at the same time, we can never let our priority be on saving the boat and not saving the people. And I think that like is a really like really important thing, because in some ways it can almost become easier culturally to focus on the boat because that's what everyone is doing and that's like the hurrah hurrah, but then it can also be easier to focus just on the people. So I think we need to check ourselves, where are we in that metaphor, and then like make sure we're not losing focus on what Christ focused on, which was coming, you know, to seek and save the lost. and obviously not to neglect the societal issues, but then to not make that the priority either.
I find that to be so true. And I think that we were starting to feel like, oh no, we're going to run out of time when we were talking about like the whole why should Christians care thing. But like even in our study of Ephesians, right, like we were talking about how our fight is not against flesh, right? And that like the sermons that I've heard about that have been some of the best social justice sermons, because it is very like, that's true. If we don't have that perspective, then how are we different than a secular social activist, right? And I think what you just said is near and dear to my heart, where it's like, the goal is right relationships, right? And the goal is salvation, right? And so, and part of like being active or like speaking out against social injustice is to right those relationships. But you're right. Like, I don't know that the goal for a Christian is to completely right the system, because I don't know that that is
possible.
Yeah. Another issue that what David raises is probably worthwhile exploring in the future is that what is a biblical worldview in terms of salvation and social justice? So based on the survey that I've seen you did, our people have a good biblical perspective on social issue. Now, to throw a curveball, how does that integrate with evangelism, salvation? See how they respond to that. Are you with me? Yeah. Because a part of the forum, what you're doing is that we try to help people to put together a biblical framework. That's what you're doing. Am I right? That's what you're doing. You're trying to put together a biblical framework so that we can work from this biblical framework, how as believers respond to these issues. Yeah?
This is like a launching pad. This is like, this is not the solution at all. We can't even touch on that. And you bring up really good points. In the survey, there was one person who did say like, government does this, but we Christians do this. I think, like there are things that we, I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, how do we respond as a church and not rely on a non-Christian institution to help us uphold and live out the reality of the kingdom of God, right? Like, so, and really saying like, these are the things I believe in and here's what I'm going to do. And I mean, like, my whole thing has been, my idealistic self is like, if we all continue to live every day in obedience to Christ, then I'm hoping that we all contribute to justice everywhere, because that's what the kingdom of God looks like as we enact it out, right? But obviously that's a little different, so there has to be more like focused action.
We mentioned the Tim Keller article. Bible Project also has a really good video on justice. Can
you send us those link of resources, Tim? I'd like to read them. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
But Tracy, you set that stage quite well in terms of justice. I think that helps us to understand how does God see it, Yeah.
If you want to read further, after the article, Tim Keller actually wrote a whole book called Generous Justice.
Oh, really? You have the book?
I do have the book. It's a very good book.
Okay.
I really enjoyed Tim Keller as a preacher.
I think he's a great thinker.
Bible teacher. So you should check it out. I read it. It was really, really great.
Okay. Very good. That was good dialogue. I enjoyed it.
There were, I think, a couple of questions that we didn't quite get to address because it got kind of like, oh my God, we need to finish towards the end. I agree with Matt that I think ideally we don't align with the organization, but saying Black Lives Matter, saying BLM, unfortunately has come to be completely associated with it. So that's true. Oh, someone just came in. Uh-oh.
Oh, who's Raj?
Should I not have let that person in? Sorry. I don't know who Raj is.
My friend,
It's your other friend.
Okay. I was like, oh no, did I just let in a Zoom like crasher? But what else did I not?
Maybe like my only response to that about like people really associate with the organization is to say then okay, so if that's maybe challenging us, like if we want to say we believe in the dignity of Black people and we recognize the pain that they go through and like a systemic like oppression that they experience on many different levels, then maybe you can say it a different way, but to focus on saying it a different way rather than, like we said, like negating the experience, right? And I appreciate like words do matter. The words we say matter, and sometimes we use specific words to manipulate or to elicit a reaction out of everybody. So you're saying like don't just use words to like get every shock or reaction. Like clarify, have an honest dialogue like we're having here, because a lot of you guys bring up really, really good points that I need to consider and continue to learn from too.
Yeah.
And are you going to make this available video for people who couldn't attend?
Yeah, with some editing, because all of BK and my pre-forum banter is in this video. So the exclusive behind the scenes.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm going to do some editing today, and then I can upload it to our YouTube channel as unlisted, and then, well, we could list it. I don't really mind, but no, because everyone's face is on it, so never mind. But yeah, I think that this went exceedingly well because I was really nervous. To David's point, something that I kind of want to discuss further, but we don't have to do it now, is the term racism. I recently discovered that I even have a different definition than one of my friends who's much more liberal than I am. And she was saying, like, her belief is that, like, there can't be reverse racism, and actually blacks can't be racist against whites, right? So that's her stance. And I was like, I don't understand that logically, because can't anybody hold prejudice against a race, right? So, like, if you flip it around, because there's a lot of dialogue that I'm in right now about whiteness, about white supremacy, about how it's like invaded our thinking and we need to reclaim our theology and we need to, all this stuff. And it like making me really uncomfortable because I feel like it demonizes white people. And as Asian and conflict avoidant and all that stuff, like within me, I have a lot of discomfort with demonizing any race, whether it's the oppressive race or not, right? And so my friend was like, no. To me, the word racism implies power and implies oppression, right? So she's saying that for her, to be racist is to exert racial power over another group. And I was like, whoa, that's not at all how I define racism. So, but because I now understand your definition, I understand why you can say how blacks in America can't be racist against whites, because they're not in a position to exert racial power systemically over whites, right? And I was like, but man, I was like, I don't know if I can buy into that definition. But I also don't know, because like Glenn mentioned this too, I don't know if the solution is to stop using the word racism. And because in some ways, my default approach is to just define it before we continue the conversation, right? I'm like, as long as we start with the same definition, then we could talk about it, right? Like, I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I completely agree that it's an emotionally charged word and that we need to be wise in how we use it. And I agree that everyone's definition of racism is different. That I super agree with, because I just found that out recently in a very, not confrontational, but just in like a, whoa, that surprised me way. Because I thought that I had the universal definition for racism, which is not at all true.
Very good. Well done.
If I could just add to that for a second, I think part of the problem in this whole conversation is you have a secular humanist organization and really like movement that is defining these words and these terms. And so the whole concept of like white people being inherently racist is like a religion. It's like original sin. And like the atonement for that is to like take these courses and to do this re-education and to like train your thinking, and then you have to speak out and evangelize other people and to become anti-racist. It's become a religion in a way. And really, I think the danger for us Christians is to get sucked into that and to basically become Christians in name only, but basically adopt this wokeism type religion. And so I don't think the solution is then to demonize all those people and to say like no, that's just all evil, liberal, leftist thinking, like agenda, like stay away. But it's to engage like this, to have these nuanced conversations, but then to also be acutely aware of that. Like, I just want to bring up one point about the Black Lives Matter. A lot of people say Black Lives Matter is associated with bad things. Well, one of those things, leaked documents from their organization showed that they are fully and unequivocally in support of transgender teaching for our elementary school kids. So they have like the content of a curriculum that they're writing, which tells children, if you think you're a boy, then you're a boy. If you think you're a girl, you're a girl. Some people think they're neither, and that's okay. And so like, I would love also the church to speak out on this. Like, I would love Tim Keller to write an article on this, but like, I think it's a little bit more culturally, controversial to say things on the transgender issue. And so I think as a church, like we need to not lose our convictions on all these other issues. And that's what makes it so difficult in a way, because again, when we talk about Black Lives Matter as an organization, it does have that baggage. It's very explicitly and overtly queer affirming. And in fact, a lot of Black Lives Matter people would say, if you're not queer affirming, we don't want you here. You know, your allyship is not intersectional enough, and your allyship is unworthy, basically. And so where does that lead? You know, so those are things we also need to grapple with as Christians. It's like, we can't just, you know, like surrender this fight and say like, oh, it's too complicated, there are trans people involved, I can't do anything. I think that's why this type of conversation is so important, to like find that point where we can say, no, we believe what the Bible says. We believe God created a man and woman, and we believe actually they're made in the image of God. And actually your secular humanist perspective has no basis for saying any lives matter. In fact, why is the murder of George Floyd even wrong in your worldview? You don't even understand the concept of the value of human life. And obviously not to say it in an antagonistic way, but to be unequivocal and to be proud of the fact that we have the truth, and to speak the truth in love. So, sorry,
Can I pause and interject? I really like you, David. I need to know more about you. What you're saying is right on, and I think it's a fair mind, objective assessment of the culture and biblical reference. Tell me about you. Who are you, David?
I'm just I am. I know Kim well. I was with him on the mission trip. I was a third grade teacher for a few years. I'm actually also kind of like Jackie Hill Perry. I experienced struggle with homosexual desire, and by God's grace, I can say, like, you know, I want to live by God's plan. And that's particularly why I feel passionate about the LGBT type issues, because what I see happening in the culture and in the church especially, like capitulating on this issue, I see as like such a tragedy, because I'm like, well, like if Sunday school teachers and pastors hadn't taught me the truth and hadn't been ashamed of the truth, then I would think that this is okay, and it's not okay. You know, this is not helpful, and it's a perversion of God's goodness. And so for me particularly, and also as an elementary school teacher, I see the trainings. Like I've sat in trainings where they've said to you, if you don't tell kids that they are a boy, if they say they're a girl, like you will be fired. You will lose your teaching license. And that's happening across the country. This is not a right-wing, like Fox News scandal, like conspiracy theory. This is not like Glenn Beck, Tucker Carlson making stuff up. This is actually really happening, and the church is largely silent. Why is the church silent? Because we're afraid. We're afraid of the response that people are going to give us, and we as Christians are not equipped to talk about it. Christians are not equipped. I would love to, like, for us to do some sort of forum like this, like on the transgender issue, because Christians aren't equipped to even tell people why they think transgenderism is wrong. They're just like, that's kind of yucky. But then they don't have any theological, robust understanding of engaging with it. And actually Christianity has such a better answer to men and women. Like if you ask a trans activist, what is a woman? Like what will they say to you? Yeah. Like they can't even define the word woman because they've hollowed it out of all their meaning. And so like there's such a completely intellectual bankruptcy and complete intellectual like vacuousness to their argument, and yet we're not engaging with it in a way. There's a really great channel called What Would You Say? It's a YouTube channel that kind of touches on some of these issues, and kind of gives Christians like ways to talk about them in like really simple ways. But anyway, I'm just a person,
I appreciate your perspective.
Wait, I think it's so interesting that you think the church is silent on this issue. I do not feel that way. Okay. I feel, but I feel that I agree with you that the church is ill-equipped to speak out on this issue, because I feel like the ways they have spoken out have not been clear in the theological basis for their statements, right? And as a result, they're being attacked by the liberals as being like intolerant, blah, 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 all of the above, right? And I you know what? This is like one of the suggestions that people said about issues that we will need to address eventually is this issue. I just had like 2 small group sessions with another group that I'm kind of like involved with, of young people who don't have the space to kind of ask these questions. And they were like, what should we think about LGBTQ? And I'm also, EK and I are both uncomfortable with affirming stance. Right. It's because it does like sort of take like pick and choose kind of. Anyway, you're right. There is a biblical, beautiful reason for a good God amidst
if I may interject, I think a part of the major reasons that, I agree with you, David, that the church is ill-equipped on this issue.
Yeah.
And so because we're ill-equipped from a biblical point of view, we don't have confidence to communicate.
Right.
So we don't have the conviction and clarity of what we're thinking and what's the truth.
Yeah.
I think
go ahead. Excuse me.
And the second thing is that the moment we walked away from God, we are confused about our identity.
Yeah.
Because who we are has to be in a right relationship with God, the Almighty, who created us.
Right.
So because we have walked away from our Creator, a reflection of our image is now distorted and broken.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and I think, like, I agree with you, Tracy. Like, I think, if I could correct myself, I think a lot of the TGC, like Gospel Coalition, like John Piper following evangelical church is I would say silent in the sense that they believe it's wrong, but then they don't feel like they can talk about it. And they're also culturally sensitive enough that they recognize how culturally outcast this makes you and how bigoted and hated you will be by larger society. Then you have the more independent Baptist and kind of more like, Christians that don't care as much and kind of maybe aren't as aware of but even them, they're getting silenced. Like, look at Donald Trump. He's a Republican who supports gay marriage. That's the first Republican president that supports that. Like, isn't that interesting how the Republicans who are supposed to be so socially conservative now have even capitulated on this issue, right? So again, and my point is not that therefore support Donald Trump or any Republicans by any means, but it's just to show how this issue has changed so rapidly in our culture. Like, the Supreme Court just said that the word sex in 1964 meant transgenderism. Like, WTP, like, what the heck is that all about? But then like, what was the response from TGC? What was the response from evangelicalism at large? So muted. It was like,
I just think that, so this is a very broad strokes and overgeneralized answer, but I just think my observation is that, like, the whole, starting from Prop 8 all the way to like legalizing gay marriage in the Supreme Court, right? Like, that whole journey was, in the world's eye, botched by the evangelical church, right? Like, just like the way it was handled, right? And individually, like, I've heard cases from various churches who have just like had someone in their church identify it as a queer, right? And be completely mishandled and have left the church completely. And so the church was like, oh no, what do we do with our convictions and also our desire to not lose any sheep? Right. And so they were and so now that, like, we kind of like shifted into this sort of like affirming, we're turning right into an affirming sort of culture. Now what do we do about transgender? And I think the church is now a little bit hesitant to be like, I'm going to be super vocal. They're afraid for the fact that it's going to be shamed, blah, blah, blah.
Right. And I think, like, what we just saw with gay marriage and homosexuality happen, like, we're just seeing repeat right now with transgenderism. Like the church was kind of ill-equipped and handled it poorly and botched it. I completely agree in so many ways. And then, like, right now with transgenderism, we're doing the exact same thing. We're not really informed about it. We're not educated. We're not able to speak on it clearly. We're just kind of fumbling our words, and we're not.
It is interesting to me, though, because I think for me, where I need further exploration and discussion, and where I have trouble speaking out about it, is the distinction between holding a non-believer accountable to the standard, to my own convictions and my faith, versus holding a believer accountable. Right. And that ties into, like, politics. Like, EK is in mental health, and so, like, she is also getting all of the tolerance training, right? Like, she's getting the, like, I need to teach. I need to counsel in a way that's, I
work for a community mental health agency that gets contract from the government. My boss's boss is leading basically the LGBTQ, like, increase of resources and trainings and all of that kind of stuff. And so, I think where it is a question of, like, what do you do if you are a Christian operating in a secular, non-Christian thinking, non-Christian worldview kind of, like, position? Like, what is your role? Because then we even had discussions of, like, the pride flag, do we put it up? And some Christians are like, but what about the Christian flag? Like, there's all these different things you nitpick. But then, like, I think the bigger question is, like, because this becomes, and it's so different from the race issue, right? Because the race issue, there's so many biblical perspectives of, like, this is, the race has nothing to do with it. That's just the skin color you're born into, the geographic location.
It's just straight up injustice. Like,
Right. But I would actually argue, go ahead, finish, sorry.
yeah, I guess touch on this issue of like sin and God's heart and identity that is just much more complicated. And I agree. Like, I think there's a lot of people who, I think what we want to do in this forum, which we're trying a little bit to you and to Leanna, is can we equip people to teach in a way that will share the gospel and the good news of God imbuing his identity into you, without like becoming just like, you know, like while accepting that people may not accept the gospel in that way, but without like saying everyone is going to hell, but also like to, if we don't know, then to do more research and to like continue to read the Bible and receive conviction from the Spirit to then share like boldly about these things. So not being afraid, but also like not be misinformed or not be like ill-equipped. I think
definitely. And I mean, I would just say like about the race thing though, like I think LGBT issues are much more clear in the Bible than the race issue, because the Bible clearly, in terms of obviously racism is wrong and discriminating against people is wrong, but then in terms of particularly how we deal with it, I think like the Bible's, you know, commands about homosexuality is particularly and men and women are much more clear than its injunctions about saying like we need to respond in this particular way to like, you know, America's particular situation with race. And then the other thing is I think like, what was I gonna say? Oh my goodness.
There's so much to say. Look at it. I feel like we're exploding.
I actually have to run, but thank you guys so much. Like seriously, you guys are awesome for having this conversation, and thank you guys. I'm so thankful that Tim has such a great church, and God bless you guys.
Welcome to join us anytime, and we hope that one day we'll be ready to have the LGBTQ one, because
and again, my point was not to be like, oh, why are you having this one, not having that one? Not
at all. Not at all. I wasn't even sure if we were ready for this one. Like, to be honest, as a congregation, right? Yeah. So like, I think I would love to have this conversation. And it's long overdue, and it will result in stuff like this where we're just like, everything we've been thinking about for the last 10 years is going to come out right now, because oh my God.
Which is so cool. Like, it's so cool that, because Christians, like we kind of think, and then we go on our social media, but then we don't actually get to talk to other Christians. So I'm so thankful for this. Seriously, God bless you guys. Amen to what you're doing. And
I think we are going to wrap up though.
Okay.
So for everyone else listening in, thank you so much for being here. And we hope, if you have further thoughts, please email us. And please do fill out the forum, the thingy, the link that I put in the chat that is now gone. So let me try to post it again really quickly so everybody can click there right now. Subscribe. No, just kidding. And it was great to see everyone, and have a great Saturday. I love you all. Peace be with you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, I'm going to end the meeting for all so that there's a definitive ending. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Bye.